Thank you, Reverend Hall. Thanks for the opportunity to present in this timely and important conference. I'm joining you from the ancestral territory stewarded by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. The United Church of Canada is sometimes referred to as the church with the soul of a nation. It grew up with the emergent nation building of Canada. So it is a church that is deeply embedded in the soil of the nation. It is a church that is also part of the social gospel movement. And so it has historically been committed to the transformation of the social order. Some may even say the Christianization of the social order. From that perspective, it has made some mistakes. For example, in its participation in the genocide of Indigenous peoples. At the same time, it has learned from its mistakes and have tried in its inner life to model some of the changes it wants to see in society. For example, it was the first church to ordain women in 1936, after the 1929 decision that women were declared persons in Canadian law. It has since offered two apologies to the Indigenous people of this country. And just last week, it offered an apology to young unwed women who were forced to give up their babies for adoption in maternity homes that the church ran. And we are currently engaged in a process of considering an apology to the LGBTQI2S community. The church has also been part of the founding membership of many Canadian and global ecumenical initiatives like the World Council of Churches, the World Communion of Reformed Churches, and the Canadian Council of Churches, to name a few. All that to say that the church has a strong and valued reputation and is often seen as a leader and has not been afraid to offer that leadership and have often walked a lonely path in doing so when it has chosen to exercise its leadership. Since 1988, the United Church of Canada, through a decision on membership and ministry, whereby the church declared that sexual orientation and identity was not an impediment to membership in the church, and that all members of the church were eligible to be considered for ordered ministry. Gays and lesbians and transgender persons have had the privilege and the opportunity of serving in the life of church. For over 20 years, this decision set the church apart from other mainline and evangelical denominations within Canada and around the world. It was not an easy decision to make. Folks were appointed to be delegates at a general council with the express instruction to vote against any decision to allow LGBTQ individuals to serve in the life of ministry in the church. At the meeting in 1988, the spirit blew. The decision split families and congregations. Many individuals left the church. Yet those who made the decision knew it was the right thing to do. Because of the way the church is structured, with the general council being the highest council, not every part of the church necessarily follows the direction of the church. For example, in 2005, although the church had approved equal marriage in 2003, it was left to individual congregations to decide whether they would allow marriages to be performed in their building. And that set a process in place in the life of the church where ministers could choose to opt out of not performing same-gender marriages. The only caveat that was placed on congregations is that if you said no, you had to find a minister from another community who would be willing to perform the marriage. The decision in 1988 did not come about unexpectedly. It began with a journey in the 60s attending to the issues of human rights of individuals of whose sexual identity was identified as gay and lesbian. The church has always done its engagement with LGBT concerns from a lens of human rights. And I recognize and acknowledge that this is a huge challenge for many church communities because they do not necessarily see basic human rights as part of the full gospel right that they teach from Scripture. And so part of the challenge is always to push back on the notion that the basic human rights are basic human rights, and that the churches and religious community have no right to deny an individual their basic human right. The church, in attempting to make the decision in 1988, did so through its understanding of Scripture and its understanding of how decisions are made. So in the United Church, we understand, using the Wesley quadrilateral, that as an interpretive tool, that Scripture, tradition, experience, and reasons are critical for the ways in which we make decision. The 1988 decision was influenced by the storytelling, the experience, the lived experience of LGBT folks. And it came about because there was internal advocacy within the life of the church. Since 1988, the church has elected its first openly gay married moderator in 2012, and in 2015 elected a lesbian married moderator, and just this year elected its first openly gay general secretary. In 2012 as well, the church made a commitment to the full inclusion of transgender person in the life of the community. In the context, and I'll wrap up, in the context of this discussion, it's important to know a few things. One is that the church has sought to catch up with where the political system is. So decisions have been made that the church sought to live into. We recognize that that is not true for many of the contexts in which we live. The United Church understands how churches, religious and faith communities are a significant obstacle to the fullness of life for all people. Thus, as a church, we have embarked on working to support communities globally who are seeking to dismantle religious and church-based homophobic support. So we've been working with National Council of Churches in India, in Korea, in the Philippines. We have gathered together partners in various parts of the world to find ways to support them in order to work in their context to dismantle homophobia, transphobia, and all the forms of oppression that impact gay and lesbian folks. Thank you.
And thank you, Reverend Michael, for that. And it's wonderful to know that there are these churches and organizations that are reaching out and doing all the work of Jesus, overseen, as I keep trying to say, by Mother Mary. Yes, that's wonderful. Our second panel speaker is the Reverend Dr. Brent Hawkes, who is the founder and executive director of Rainbow Faith and Freedom in Canada. So welcome, Reverend Brent.